Hi guys, I'm Nathan Martin with the Divine Pollination Hive and the UnityProcess.com. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about, do we find our freedom and our liberty by lowering our standards or by raising our expectations? If this is something that interests you, stay tuned. Okay, so I'm going to give a brief explanation of what I'm talking about here. And first, I think we need to really look at the meanings of words and help to understand those meanings, because if I'm just saying about standards and expectations, a lot of people will get those confused and may even have some negative connotations about them. So let's go ahead and refine and define those things so that we can move forward with a similar understanding so you can understand how we define these concepts. So for example, a minimum standard, we also call those personal boundaries. And personal boundaries are those things that keep us safe. So they're like those minimum standards and things that we're not going to tolerate, we're not going to deal with, we're not going to interact with. So if somebody's yelling at us, we don't interact with people who are yelling at us. We're not going to tolerate that. Now, I'm not going to shame on you, I expect more of you, or anything like that. But I'm not going to go in there into the power struggle when somebody tries to go into a power struggle with me. So for instance, one of my minimum standards is intellectual humility. Somebody who doesn't pretend to know it all. If they think they know it all, if they have this air of pretentiousness, then it's just not something I'm going to go into a discussion with. Now, I might read their stuff still, but I'm not necessarily going to try to enter into a dialogue with them because they already know it all and they're not really wanting to learn with me. They're just trying to talk down to me. So that's one of my minimum standards. It's a boundary. I'm more than happy to talk to people who have intellectual humility, who are humble, who realize they don't know it all. And this is really a big virtue that I like because Socrates is one of my heroes. And one of his big sayings was, and I'll paraphrase, the one thing that I know is I don't know anything. It just means that I'm humble enough to realize that I don't know it all and that there's so much out of the scope of my ability to know. I'm not omnipresent. I'm not omniscient. So let me just, be open to learning more and learning more and learning more. The way a minimum standard is worded is very important. A minimum standard or a boundary doesn't tell people what to do. What it actually does is it tells people what you're going to do. So for instance, I like to use a laundry basket analogy. I'm more than happy to do all the laundry on every Sunday when it's in the basket. If it's not in the basket, I'm not going to do it. That's a boundary. I don't go around the house cleaning up everybody else's laundry. I don't collect the laundry. I don't try to decide what laundry needs to be done. I come to the basket every Sunday. I grab the basket. I take the basket to the laundry machine and I do laundry. I do laundry that is in the basket. That's it. That's what I am going to do. It's not telling anybody else what to do. But if they want me to do their laundry, then their laundry is going to have to be in the basket. That's a boundary. That's a minimum standard. Another example is, I'm more than happy to talk to you when your voice is calm like mine. So now let's look at expectations. And a lot of people are confused about expectations because what they define as expectations is kind of like, I failed at expectations, therefore I went to expectation level 2. And expectation level 2 is manipulation, coercion, and guilt. So those things aren't really expectations. But because people think they're expectations, this is what everybody starts to associate with expectations, we really kind of lose the meaning of what an expectation is, and it becomes distorted into this thing that it is not. So for example, expectation level 2 becomes, because I don't know how to expect correctly, I'm going to now start guilting you. I'm going to put the pressure on you to do it for me. And if you don't do it right, then I'm going to get on you. So I don't know how to be a good parent. And because I don't know how to be a good parent and I don't know how to properly interact with my children, I'm going to now guilt my children because I had better expectations of you guys. You should have behaved poorly, and I really expected more. But that's shaming, that's guilt, that's not actually an expectation. If you had actually true expectations, they would have risen to them. But what we really get from life is we always get what we put out. So if we have a very low expectation of our children, for example, our children are going to behave accordingly. They're going to give us exactly what we give to them. If we expect poorly of them, they're going to act poorly. If we expect them to really rise and be able to meet our standards, then they're going to actually do really quite well. They're going to give us what we want and what we expect of them. This is why when I'm talking to children, I talk to them in such a way as I realize that they're capable and I expect them to be capable. And so my expectation is that children are capable. And that's how I talk to them. That's how I talk to all people. I talk to people knowing that they're capable. Not everybody meets my minimum standards to actually have that dialogue with me, but if they can meet my minimum standards, then when I have that expectation, things are going to go well. So an expectation is something that we expect of life. We expect a lot from life, we get a lot from life. We expect very little from life, we'll get very little from life. I heard an example given by Abraham Hicks where they said if you expect for your keys to be lost, you're not going to be able to find your keys. So if you're always expecting loss, if you're going to expect that you're going to always lose your keys, then on a regular basis, you're going to lose your keys. You're not going to be able to find them very well because that is your expectation. So a lot of times we try to say we have high expectations of people and they just don't meet them. But really we don't. We have very low expectations, they meet them, and then we shame them for meeting our expectations. So we set out low expectations and we shame and guilt them because they didn't meet high expectations that we didn't really have. They actually met our low expectations. So expectation level 1 is actually what happens. That is the creative force of the universe. We put out an intention. We set an expectation for what we're going to receive back from an endeavor. And when we go to do that endeavor, we receive that back. If we have low expectations, we receive very little back. And if we have high expectations, we expect a lot back, or we get a lot back. But if we don't really understand expectation and we think we have high expectations when we really have low expectations, then we go in and we start guilting and those kinds of things and shaming, and that is expectation level 2, and that's what most people associate with expectations. So this isn't a good thing, but we're just trying to clarify what expectation is and what it's not. And I'm going to read you a poem about expectations so you can kind of better understand what it's all about. I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening, when I counted my scanty store. For life is just an employer, he gives you what you ask. But once you have set the wages, why, you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn dismayed, that any wage I had asked of life, life would have paid. And that's by Jesse B. Rittenhouse. So now I'm going to talk about how freedom and safety work in regards to minimum standards and boundaries and expectations. So what you have is you have your minimum standards right here, and you have your expectations right here. So this is your minimum standards, this is your expectations, and in between there, that is your freedom. So this is your safety, and now the ceiling right here, this is all the freedom you have. Now, what happens a lot of times when we raise our boundaries, when we raise our minimum standards, so let's say we have really low minimum standards and we have this set as our high or our expectation. And we raise our minimum standards up because we learn, oh, I don't like that, and I set a boundary. Well, if we don't raise our expectations, what's going to happen is we're going to be stuck now with very little freedom. There's not a lot of movement going on there. We're not going to get a lot back from life because we have high standards, high minimum standards, so we're not having a lot of drama, we're very safe. But now we have very, very, very little freedom. And so what a lot of people do is they kind of just drop the floor on the thing. They just drop all standards every so often, and they have a lot of freedom, and now they get themselves into a lot of trouble because they have no minimum standards. So now their life is very unsafe. Then they're like, oh boy, I need to raise my standards again. So they do this, and then they have no freedom again. And so they're constantly ping-ponging between the two. Lots of freedom, no safety. Lots of safety, no freedom. Well, what they really could do in this instance is they raise their minimum standards, and then they raise their expectations. So the expectations go up in accordance with and proportionally to your minimum standards. So, for example, we'll give this thing about a job versus having your own business and being an entrepreneur. So we're going to give an example here. So here's your ceiling, and here's the floor. You work a job, but you're tired of working a job. You want to raise your standards up. So you say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm no longer going to take money from other people or from an employer, and I need to do this. But now what you have is this is still your ceiling. What you need to do is you need to raise your expectations up to meet your new minimum standard. So whereas before you're like, I'm working at a job and this is my ceiling. Now you raise your standards, but this is still your ceiling. You don't have a lot of freedom there. You raise your expectations. I need at least 10 clients a month at such and such a rate in order to make it and to survive. So you raise your expectations, but it has to be a reasonable amount of raising. You can't raise them too high. If you say I'm going to raise my expectations to a millionaire, and so now you're right here and your expectations are way up here, you're not going to actually get there. You're going to have to raise them incrementally. So if you're right here, you go like that, you have to just kind of raise it incrementally. So it's almost like you're going up a ladder, and that's how you kind of stair step evolve. You go through what's called stair step evolution. You grow incrementally. You don't take too big of steps because life is a process. You have to take one step at a time, and you have to raise your expectations in accordance with how you raise your minimum standard. So once you raise your minimum standard, then you have to go and you have to set a new higher expectation. You have to expect more out of life. But if you expect way too much and there's no bridge built and there's no rungs on the ladder, you're going to get what's called learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is where you try something, but it doesn't really work for you. It doesn't go where you want it to go because it's just too far for you to grasp. And then you get depressed. And after getting depressed enough because you keep failing, because you set your expectations way too high, then you're going to quit. You're not going to want to try it again. Then you're going to lower your standards and you're going to go back to a job. So that's kind of what happens with people who they either set too high of expectations or they don't set high enough expectations at all, and they never get anywhere. They never really grow as a person, as an individual, because that's the whole point. We don't want to just stay stagnant. Don't want to just stay where we are in our career or in our life or wherever that might be. We want to raise our minimum standard up, and then we want to raise up our expectations accordingly. So the one thing we need to remember is that life is a process, and we have to take incremental steps to get where we're going. If we always try to go too high, if we aim too far, then we get what I already called learned helplessness. But if we take baby steps, if we're always just challenging ourselves, so we're putting the challenge just above where it's comfortable. We're raising the bar just beyond what we're comfortable with. If we can do that, if we can raise our expectations just enough to challenge us, but not bury us, then we will always keep growing. So Jordan Peterson talked about an experiment with lab rats, where if there's a bigger rat and a little rat and they play together, the little rat needs to win at least 40% of the time. And if he can't win at least 40% of the time, then he's not going to play the game anymore. He's going to quit and he's never going to wrestle again. And see, that's what's going to happen to us in our life if we don't challenge ourselves just enough, but not too much. We have to give ourselves the opportunity to succeed at least 40% of the time. So if we set unreasonable expectations out of life, and we haven't actually built the bridge, then we're going to lose 100% of the time because the expectation is just too big. So we have to build the bridge of our expectations one rung of the ladder at a time. And as we continue to build that bridge, we're going to get where we want to go. We're going to get where we're going. And that is because we've set realistic expectations, and now we can win at least 40% of the time. And when I say winning and losing, I mean it's a game. It's a game of progression. We want to progress, but if we keep getting beat and we just learn that we suck, we're not going to want to play anymore, and we're not going to want to play the game. So we need to be reasonable with the expectations that we set, and we need to grow it a little at a time. Don't start too much. Don't say, I want to be a millionaire tomorrow. It's not reasonable to think that you're going to be a millionaire tomorrow. But if we set that expectation, well, you know, it is reasonable that I have 15 clients this month. And then the next month, 15 more. And after I get some stability at 15 clients, it's reasonable to raise my expectation a little bit more. Now it's reasonable that I can say 20 to 25 clients. And once I can get 20 to 25 clients on a reasonable basis, or then I raise it again. And then I might say I'm going to want to add a different stream of income because I don't have enough hours in a day to handle all these clients. So now I'm going to start making some packages and I'm going to sell them online. And then I raise my expectation and I raise my game just a little bit more. Not enough that buries me because it's too far and too unattainable, and not too little that it doesn't challenge me and I stay stagnant and bored. I want to continue to grow. And so as we raise our minimum standards, we also need to raise our expectations.
If you enjoyed this video, please click like.
If you'd like to stay up to date with our videos, please subscribe.
If you would like to be notified via email whenever we release a video, please click the bell next to subscribe.
If you have any comments or questions and would like to dialogue about this topic, please leave them below.
If you're interested in becoming a patron and having special access to our community, please visit our Patreon page linked below.
We're Nathan and Aline from the Divine Pollination Hive and the UnityProcess.com.
Be safe,
Be sovereign.
be well.